Welcome to The Coaching Corner, a podcast for coaches coaching in the child welfare field. I'm your host, James Coloma, and on today's episode, we'll be talking about getting ready for your first coaching session. In a moment, Bill James will join us on today's episode to help us understand more about this topic. I'm James Coloma, and we'll be right back. Welcome to The Coaching Corner, Bill.
Thanks, James. I'm glad to be here.
We're glad to have you as well. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I got started working with adolescents in residential treatment back in 1989, which seems like a really long time ago now, and started working for the County of San Diego in child welfare in 1994. And worked there until just recently. I came to work for the Academy as a practice coach. I think my experience with group supervision for a very long time and some experience teaching and training motivational interviewing helped sort of get me ready for this coaching gig. And so I'm really excited to have some resources available here at the Academy for new coaches to access. So I'm excited to be here today.
Great. We're excited to have you as well. And it sounds to me that since you've had some experience coaching for the Academy, you'll be able to help us understand what is it like to get ready for your first coaching session.
Well, I think so. And I think it's useful that because my role changed recently over the last 6 months, I still remember what it was like to walk into that first couple of coaching days. And a little bit disoriented and a little bit like, wow, what am I supposed to do? So now that I have a better handle on that, I'm hoping I can pass that along.
So as a new coach, what do you suggest that would be helpful when I'm preparing for my first coaching session?
Well, you're almost certainly going to have done some shadowing with other coaches before you're sent out on your own, much like we do in the rest of child welfare. But I think one of the most important steps to take that people maybe don't think about is to understand the scope of work that you are supposed to be fulfilling in your coaching role so that you kind of know the boundaries of what you're supposed to be working on, and you'll recognize if somebody's asking you to go outside of those. Much like the contract phase of coaching on a person-to-person level, understanding that contract or those agreements between your agency and whatever client agency you're working for is very helpful.
Who's the best person then to help me to understand what the scope of work is?
Well, here at the Academy, we have people, we really live in kind of a crisscross management or supervision structure. I have one supervisor who is responsible for my work, but every county in our client, among our clients, has got a different county consultant. And so that county consultant is probably, for that particular county, is probably the best person to go to say, just, help me know exactly what it is I'm supposed to be doing for this county. Maybe get a copy of the document and review it together, something like that.
Okay, great. And why is it important, once again, for me to know the scope of work?
So, well, just like any profession, just like any helping professional, you need to have nailed down what your scope of expertise and what your scope of practice is going to be. And so in a more narrow sense, different counties are asking the Academy to help them with different things. Most of it is around reinforcing and helping the workforce transfer the learning from a classroom into their practice. But there are some exceptions to that. There are some situations where you're helping a manager think about implementing workforce practice improvement that was covered in the classroom into their workforce. So that's a little bit different. And as long as that's okay in terms of supporting that contract, then you can go ahead and do that. But if somebody asks you to come up and coach on underwater basket weaving, or they ask you to coach on somebody's poor performance in court report writing, or some other performance issue that the supervisor is just struggling with, you want to stay away from that. You want to stay far away from that. And so knowing that that's not part of your contract can help you set those limits and remind people what those organizational group agreements are.
Okay, thank you. What else then do I need to know before my first coaching session? Talked about knowing the skill before. What else?
So I think another thing that's really helpful to recognize is that people are going to come in with different agendas. And there's three broad categories of folks who sit down with me in any of the offices that I work in. The vast majority of the time, it's an individual worker and their supervisor who want to get clarity about a case. Now, in my situation, I'm coaching predominantly around safety organized practice. And so I have worked out with my supervisor sort of a triage of things to consider when somebody needs clarity about a case. I always make sure, if that's the topic, I always make sure to make it clear that as the coach, I'm not there to help make casework decisions or interpret policy, that they need to go to their supervisor or policy if they have questions about that. So that's one main category. The next category, and usually this is a supervisor or a worker that will come in, and they want help with a specific skill. Maybe they want to get better at facilitating a mapping session. And so there you're going to use a skills-based demonstration and observation kind of process. And then the third main category of coaching topics is usually managers or supervisors who are asking about how can I better support my workforce in implementing this material. And then for those of you that are familiar with the Child Welfare Coaching Toolkit out of the University of California at Davis, you can go there straight to the CLEAR model or the GROW model, work your way through those steps, and during the action part of the CLEAR model, use the GARS, Goal Attainment Rating Scale, to help them think through what they would like things to look like 6 months or 12 months into the future for their workforce. And so if you can just sort of mentally be prepared for those three levels of question or coaching and have a game plan for those three, you'll be really well prepared.
So to prepare for my first coaching session then, I think you said a game plan. It really means for me, what I'm preparing to do is it might be around those three areas, and to know if I'm coaching around skills, I should know something a little about that skill and help guide that worker around those skills.
That's right. That's right. You also need to be you need to be prepared to say, I'm not an expert at that skill. Who can we find that knows how to do this skill and could coach you? And there you're back to simply eliciting what it is they're hoping to gain, and then helping them develop an action plan to go and find that external, that third person resource that they can make use of.
Okay. I heard you before talk about a disclaimer. Do you have a disclaimer that you use at the beginning of a coaching session to help the person you're coaching understand what the parameters that you have around coaching? Absolutely.
I think I pretty much say exactly the same thing every time we get started, and that is, so let's just remember, casework decisions and policy issues are things that you need to work out with your supervisor or with the policy section here in this county. I am really here to help you do some critical thinking about how you're looking at the case or how you're looking at your work, or to help you with skill building in terms of how you're interacting with your clients. The only exception to that is when, say, a manager sits down clearly and says, I'm hoping you can help me figure out a plan to implement this into the future. And even then, I often refer them back to their deputy director or somebody like that if they have any specifics about policy questions.
It sounds to me like that disclaimer goes really hand in hand with what the scope of work is. So back to what we talked about earlier, if I know the scope of work, I know what I'm coaching around, and I'm allowing the person I'm coaching to know those parameters as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it avoids misunderstandings about your role. And we also want very much to build the capacity and the critical thinking skills between workers and supervisors. So we don't want to get in the way of that. We want to facilitate it. So if they're looking to us for answers, that doesn't help. We need to be providing them with powerful questions that if the supervisor's not in the room, and they often are, but if the supervisor's not in the room, that they're going to go back and say and ask, what do we think about this? We hadn't discussed this yet.
Okay, sounds good. And this is new to not only the academy, but to the counties as well.
I think that's another important piece to remember is that the coaching process is new to everybody. It's new to the academy. It's new to the counties. And so, be okay with just being open to new experiences. You might make mistakes along the way. The county might not quite understand how to make use of you at first, and so that might be a little bit awkward. Relax. It's proven to be very effective in the long term, and as we all sort of stumble in the right direction, we all will figure out how to make coaching more effective.
So that brings me to then I'm in the office, or I've gotten ready to go into the office. Now that I'm in the office, how do I get people to come to coaching sessions?
Well, that involves developing a game plan also, actually, of having your schedule ready far enough in advance to be able to let the client office know when you're going to be there. I send out a reminder a week before I'm going to be there, an email reminder, and another email reminder the day before I'm going to be there. That still doesn't guarantee that you're going to be busy as a coach for that whole day. And so if I show up and there's not a lot going on, I make it a point to walk around, introduce myself to the supervisors and the managers, remind them that I'm there, and ask in a fairly open-ended way, how can I be of service to you guys today? What might be helpful in terms of reaching out to the workforce? Is there a supervisor who's going to be running a case consultation? And could that then be a chance either for me to get to know some of the case? I mean, if it really is your first day coaching and they're sitting down to have case consultation and they invite you to sit down, go ahead and sit down. See what some of the issues are in the office. See what some of the personalities are like, and be comfortable just doing relationship building.
So do you set up your own schedule then? Do you say, hey, I'm going to be there on this Tuesday or next Wednesday? Is that typically how we set up our coaching sessions?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I establish my own calendar based on the deliverables that are required by the contract. So another reason to know the contract. And I make it a point to have discussions with the managers and supervisors in the various offices to be sensitive to what days of the month and what days of the week are going to be most effective for them. And I do a considerable amount of rearranging my own schedule in an effort to be accommodating to when those offices think would be most helpful for me to be there.
So it sounds to me that even before I get to that office, I've done some legwork of talking to these supervisors and managers, finding out when is a good day for me to come, maybe even finding out if there is a supervisor who might be doing a case review that day for me to sit in on. And then so I know that maybe that's the day that I should go so that there's at least something for me to sit on and coach around?
Well, I think I'm not quite sure that it's that cut and dried. It would be great to have that much prep work in advance. And it just depends on the client county that you're going to work for, how well established those patterns are. When I started to show up for my client county several months ago, some of that was in place. There was a kind of a tentative schedule, and then several things made that schedule not workable. And so I sort of had to renegotiate with those various offices about what was going to be most effective. But that wasn't my first day of coaching. That was, after a couple of weeks of working with these folks.
Right. What else? Is there anything else that I need to know before I show up on my first day?
Well, there's probably 1,000 things you need to know. I will say that if you do already know how to do reflective or active listening and to make reflective statements, you can go a long way towards finding out what's going on for folks just by doing that. And we're going to have a podcast at some point, I think, about motivational interviewing and its role both in coaching and in child welfare. But if somebody already has some history with those kinds of active listening, just settle in, do a lot of active listening, and you'll probably be okay.
Okay. Well, I think that that helps me prepare for an upcoming coaching session and getting ready for my first coaching session.
Super.
Well, and I thank you for sharing your input and your information about how to prepare.
Well, this was useful for me, too, to really sort of think through the issue, so I appreciate the time to reflect on it.
Okay. Well, we'll be right back. You've been listening to The Coaching Corner from the Public Child Welfare Training Academy Radio through the Academy for Professional Excellence at San Diego State University School of Social Work. For more information about the Academy for Professional Excellence and the services that we offer, please visit us on the web at theacademy.sdsu.edu. You can also subscribe to the Academy for Professional Excellence's YouTube channel by searching for the Academy SDSU. If you want to get hold of us and let us know what you think about this podcast, please send an email to jcoloma@mail.sdsu.edu, and in the subject line, reference the title of this podcast. A special thank you to our guest today, Bill James. And please join us next time as we explore other topics in the child welfare arena. I'm your host, James Coloma, and now go out there and inspire and innovate our child welfare field.